Mackling and McGarry on 680 CJOB.
The musical chairs game of Mackling and McGarry continues today. It's Brett McGarry with Keith McCullough.
Hello, Brett.
In for Greg Mackling after Kim Babbage-Gazelle did a fine job yesterday. Keith is going to do a nice job today and tomorrow, I think. And the story is photo radar. Photo radar.
Maybe the only other thing that can get people more worked up than talking about legalizing marijuana is photo radar. And it's an interesting story because it could potentially, Brett, and obviously neither of us are lawyers, but set a bit of a precedent that could affect drivers with tickets here in Winnipeg and in Manitoba. Story out of the Montreal Gazette. Montreal's mayor asking the province to clarify rules around photo radar after a judge recently threw out an $1,100 speeding ticket issued by one of the devices. Now, the judge there said the evidence in the photo radar fine was not admissible because it was based on hearsay evidence, i.e., the officer who signed the ticket and made it official was not present at the time of the infraction, didn't visit the site afterwards to clarify. This was a big ticket, too. Driver accused of going 140 in a 70 zone. That's why the fine would have been over $1,100. This isn't going 60 in a 50. But the judge said, in addition to the hearsay factor, the photo radar ticket came weeks, even months after the infraction occurs. It prevents drivers from correcting their behavior as soon as the offense is committed or to plead their case right on the spot. The judge says the province has to put in place the proper procedures for police issuing tickets through photo radar to ensure there is adequate proof for each infraction. Without this, he said, it's easy to understand why people say the photo radar system is being called a cash cow for the government. So this is as big a photo radar ticket as you can get, basically. We're talking like maybe lose your license type ticket, going double the speed limit in a 70, over $1,100, Brett. And it's thrown out essentially because it was issued by one of these photo radar machines and not a real police officer. And I guess in a legal sense, the judge says that's hearsay. There's no real person there to verify that the machine was working properly, to verify that there was proper signage up. So that ticket has been quashed, and then I guess the question becomes, why wouldn't thousands of other people in Quebec, in Winnipeg, across Canada, who've been handed these photo radar tickets, try now to use the same excuse?
Let's get perspective from someone named Todd Dube. He is with Wise Up Winnipeg. Todd, thank you so much for joining us today. Before I get your opinion, rather than me sort of stumble through explaining what Wise Up Winnipeg is, how about you just quickly describe to our listeners who may be unfamiliar with your organization, what's Wise Up Winnipeg?
Yeah, sure. We're not the anti-photo enforcement group that we're often labeled as. We are pro-safety. We're traffic enforcement fairness. We're trying to draw attention to the deficient engineering unique to Winnipeg that the police are specifically targeting, rather than correct in the name of real safety. So we've been loud and clear with our messaging, but we are all about correcting engineering and not abusing drivers through ticketing.
When you say deficient engineering, what do you mean by that?
Well, speed limits. Speed limits are an engineering number, not a number that a politician decides to put on a sign. There's a prudent free flow speed of a road. For example, Grant Avenue, which was just in the news last week, it was arbitrarily lowered to 50 unnaturally. The city's own engineering documents recognize that free flow speed of 65. They lowered it to 50. They've issued 150,000 tickets in that 4-block stretch over the last 10 years since they lowered it. And it's, and the speed of the traffic will never lower there. That's just not how you can't reduce the speed of traffic by changing a number on a sign. People drive the prudent, safe, free flow rate of the road, and that's just the way it is. So that speed limit, for example, needs to be raised. Amber light times in Winnipeg are uniquely short. No other city in the world has 4-second ambers at all intersections, regardless of the speed of the road. For example, if it's an 80-kilometer-an-hour road, it has to be in the 5 to 6 second range, not 4 seconds. They're dangerously short. And by no coincidence, by the way, those 80-kilometer-an-hour intersections continue to be on the top 10 list that they issue every year as having the most collisions.
Yep.
Well, the reason being is because the amber light time is dangerously short. And by the way, they also issue 800% more red light tickets at those higher speed intersections than the other ones. So, I mean, the facts are in the data. It's just that everybody wants to ignore it.
It's funny you mentioned the Grant Avenue location, because I know that anytime I am on that street, more so when I'm heading eastbound as I'm just sort of coming around from Waverly, I find myself sometimes often exceeding 60 kilometers an hour, not because I'm intentionally speeding, just for whatever reason, that just feels like how fast I should be going. And then I look at my speedometer and realize, slow down, because there's guaranteed a photo radar around the corner, lurking along the side every time.
Well, they specifically go to the locations that are the most deficient in engineering. That's why you have 3 enforcement scenarios in that very short stretch of Grant. It's because it shouldn't be 50, period. And I told Councillor Orlico that last week in an email. It's time to correct this and to stop abusing people going through there. Fact is we have the engineering documents. It's known to have an 85th percentile, meaning that 85% of the vehicles going through there are traveling at 67 kilometers an hour. And how you determine a speed limit, or establish it rather, is you round it to the nearest tenth. Arguably, it should be 70. Certainly not 50, at the very least 60, which is what it used to be before the councillor there decided to lower it. And it's just not acceptable anymore. I mean, this has to end now. And same with the amber light timing. Our position has been to the city and to the provincial government that if they made correction to the list of areas, specific areas that we've created into a PowerPoint, 95% of these tickets would vanish overnight. They are very specifically targeting their own known misengineering, and we make a very clear case for that. Anybody who's seen it, and dozens of university law classes have seen it, 3 political parties have seen it, not this government. For some reason they're apprehensive in accepting our invitation, but 4 mayoral candidates have seen it, prompting all of them immediately the next day to hold a press conference and say, this has to end. Well, 2 years ago, we elected a new mayor. He hasn't mouthed a single word, and I'm not exaggerating, he has not mouthed a single word on this subject, and that to me is just unacceptable.
Mackling and McGarry on 680 CJOB.
It's Brett McGarry with Keith McCullough in today for Greg Mackling, and we are talking about a situation in Quebec where the Crown is not going to appeal a court decision that rejected evidence obtained from a photo radar machine. Crown spokesman says that the office will instead ensure it has better evidence in the future with which to make its case against alleged traffic violators. And this happened because a judge in November cleared a woman from having to pay a traffic ticket after he ruled the photo radar evidence against her was hearsay and therefore inadmissible in court, even though she was supposedly caught doing 141 kilometers per hour in a 70K zone, and the ticket was almost $1,200. We're speaking with Todd Dube, who is with a group called WiseUpWinnipeg, about this. And Todd, what are your thoughts? What was your reaction to this news?
I want to just say at the outset here, I'm battling a cold here, so if I have to catch my breath every now and then, bear with me, okay?
You sound great. Never would have even known it. Oh,
okay. Well, hey, listen, this is a very important development, and we've been watching it for the last few weeks. Look, it's always been our position that photo enforcement was operating outside the bounds of legal due process. So here's the issue in summary. And this applies, by the way, directly to what the Manitoba government also did 16 years ago when they created enabling legislation for photo enforcement to be enforceable by the court. It's not traditional enforcement, so they had to make amendments. So traditionally, moving violations, including speeding and red light violations, are issued by police, and they're witnessed and sworn by a police officer, which is the requirement of the law. Of course, speed and red light tickets issued by cameras are not issued by police or witnessed by police. So the province had to amend legislation to accommodate the notion of photo enforcement. That's had a lot of blowback in a lot of states and cities down south of us and around the world, and a lot of them aren't even enabled. They're not even allowed to operate. So what they did was, in effect, in Manitoba and in Quebec, they deemed photo tickets, photo speed and red light violations, to be non-moving violations, just like parking tickets, which is a summary violation that the city can simply issue you a letter in the mail in an administrative manner, and that those are enforceable by traffic court to that lower standard of evidence, a non-moving violation. So, I mean, just imagine that for a minute. Speed and red light tickets being treated, legally speaking, as non-moving violations. That's how absurd this whole situation is. So we're going to be advancing on the Manitoba government with this position and precedent soon. But just think about this, though, also. Rather than have sworn-off police officers stand behind their charge, this program, photo enforcement here in Manitoba, hires private employees, trains them for 40 hours on how to operate the camera equipment, essentially, not law enforcement, and then these people are given expert weight at court for whatever they attest to. For example, and we've caught them lying in court when testifying, for example, that the required speed limit signage was there before they set up their enforcement for that day. We proved that sign was not there in this case with FIPA documents and letters from Hydro who removed it, etc., other basis of evidence. And it went to appeal. And the decision to convict that driver was actually upheld, stating that we couldn't prove, or that person couldn't prove, that the operator intended to lie. He lied, but you can't prove that he intended to lie. So this is what I mean about operating outside of the bounds. I mean, the police would never be in these scenarios, but anything flies in traffic court when it comes to photo enforcement. So the entire legal process in Manitoba has compromised itself to accommodate this illegal ticketing program, which the province enjoys 50% of the profit from, in case anybody's wondering why this government continues to ignore these facts that we've been trying to present.
Todd, does this open up, this ruling in Quebec, then, the opportunity for a precedent to be set and for some tickets to potentially be thrown out here in Winnipeg, here in Manitoba? Because that's what our listeners are wondering right now. Are you going to take what's happened in Quebec and press the issue here?
Well, traffic court decisions are not precedent cases. That's at the very first level of the process. So a precedent doesn't come from there. However, the Crown decided to not appeal. Now, had they appealed and lost, that would have been a precedent. However, there is some value. We're going to check Canley legal records this afternoon. There is some value in the decisions, though. At least it will give the provincial government, Heather Stephenson, who I've been trying to meet with for a number of months now, it'll give her something to consider, because certainly the legal view of the same scenario here in Manitoba can't be that diverse. In fact, we've always had the position that this decision is long overdue. It should have happened in Manitoba, let alone Quebec, 16 years after Winnipeg's program was enabled through the same type of diminished legislation.
Todd, while we have a couple of minutes left here, I'm wondering if I have a text message from somebody. This relates back to the Grant Avenue situation. And he's asking for advice, and I don't know what to tell him. And maybe, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the question is, what is the advice to people in what to do with tickets on Grant Avenue? And he goes on to explain that he received a photo ticket. Actually, no, these are two separate things. Never mind. Let's just start with the Grant Avenue situation. Do you have any advice to offer, or am I putting you in an uncomfortable position by posing that question?
I could give the same answer that a judge gave. Let me give you the answer of a judge. We've gone to court dozens of times, as you know, and just before we were about to win that radar accuracy case, the Crown threw it literally moments before the decision, but we would have dealt with it a number of years ago. However, when you go to court, and you take the position that you simply don't believe you're speeding, you're going the speed limit, and the judge says, look, the speed limit is, whether you like it or not, is 50. If you have a problem with that, it's a policy matter, not a legal one. Legally speaking, they're enforcing that speed limit, right or wrongly. The judge's, JJP's direction to people that are in court is this. Go to your mayor, write your councillor, write your premier, write your mayor, contact elected people. They're the ones that can change this. Well, I can tell you that that has some impact. I think Councillor Orlico and this mayor, Bowman, need to receive thousands of emails of people that have just simply refused to hand over another paycheck to this very, very unfair and abusive enforcement. By the way, which have tickets in Manitoba 250% higher than the average of all other provinces. Think about that. Those tickets for going when you're caught on Grant Avenue going 63, when they know the speed limit there is 67, so you're getting a ticket for $280 going, in effect, the speed limit, and that same ticket would be $90 in Calgary or Edmonton.
Todd, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up with you down the road. I'm sure very interesting to see where we go in Manitoba now on the back of this decision in Quebec. I'll have your...
Winnipeg's news and information leader, 680 CJOB.
Good afternoon. I'm Brett McGarry. This is Global News on 680 CJOB. At 2 o'clock, it is Mike on that situation.
Doing discussion and conducting conversation around the fact that photo radar is out. Even though school is out itself. It's not in.
Yep.
And photo radar is a big concern, has been a concern and a topic of discussion, if not a way of life for our next guest. Todd Dube joins us from WiseUpWinnipeg. And Todd, are you surprised to learn that these photo radar vans are out snapping our pictures even though the kids are not at school?
Not at all. In fact, it's no different than Thanksgiving in Winnipeg, which means thanks for giving us your next paycheck.
Okay, fair enough. Now, Todd, Wise Up Winnipeg, by the way, is a group that was, they started as sort of an education group for Winnipeggers on photo enforcement and has kind of morphed into that, and they're working towards exposing and solving unsafe traffic engineering and subsequent unfair enforcements. That's the description from their Facebook page. So I guess it seems pretty obvious what the answer is, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway. Should photo radar be out on days where kids are not in school?
Well, I mean, look at the premise of the law. It's to protect kids when they're traveling to and around school. Well, look, when school's not in, I guess that sort of undermines that position. They shouldn't be there. But then, of course, being undefined in the law as it's written, people have taken the position, well, kids are out on the street at all the time. Well, I mean, you can make the same argument around Polo Park Shopping Center. So, without specifically defined legislation, it's going to continue to be abused just like the rest of the photo enforcement program is in the city of Winnipeg.
Many of our Facebook respondents, Todd, saying, you know what, the signs are pretty clear. September to June, just slow down and you don't need to worry about it.
Nobody has had success with lowering speed limits to 30 kilometers an hour. The fact is people go the prudent speed through there, and when they know that there's school in attendance, people are observant. I have to say the statistics don't support this. This whole inference that there is this danger around schools in Winnipeg is wholly unsupported. There was only one incident over the last 15 years that we're aware of, and that is from a school bus driver themselves. So the danger doesn't exist to begin with. But if you really want people to slow down around schools, I've got young kids. I'm not against the notion of this. But, I mean, then there are other ways to do it. Bring attention to the fact that you're entering a reduced zone, and other cities do that. That have true intentions of actually slowing speed, and they have flashing yellow lights that you can't miss when school is active and when enforcement specifically is active. Well, if the people that are getting these tickets, these are inadvertent, unintentional violations. They're as surprised as anybody that they got one in the mail. They weren't intentionally speeding anywhere. So if you really want them to know that they're entering a zone that is reduced to 30 unnaturally, then at least let them know that through increased awareness, including signage when they enter and exit.
Before we move on to the lawsuit question, one more on the photo radar in and around school zones. Brett and I were having a discussion as to what the magic number is. What's the lowest rate of speed you've seen someone get a ticket? Most people I know is around 40, 41, 42. Have you been made aware of anybody getting a ticket for closer to 30, Todd?
No, that's a good question. and people need to know this. The threshold for issuing a photo ticket in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, or Winnipeg, I should say, is 12, meaning that the first ticket that they're going to issue is at 13 over. So that's why when you hear about people on Grant Avenue everybody seems to get a 63. They figure there's some conspiracy there. We've all got 63s. How could we all be going 63? Well, that is just the first number that they can issue. They won't issue at 62 or anything less than that. But what that also reflects is that the great majority of tickets in the 80 and 90% range are issued to 63 and 64. You see very few tickets up in the 70s and 80s. Same thing applies to schools. You won't get a school zone ticket for anything less than 43, being the 13 threshold.
That's interesting to know. Thank you, Todd.
And it's also interesting, and particularly on Grant, because that's a situation where people probably think it's 60, so they're just going a little bit over, and then they realize, whoops, I was going way over.
And what they were doing was they were going the speed limit the entire time until the city lowered it arbitrarily to 50 because a secretary-treasurer of a school board committee, not even a board, a parent advisory council, recommended that it be lowered for safety of kids. Well, far from being an engineer, she was endorsed by the councillor, and of course that's it's almost a bulletproof motion to put forward, lower the speed limit, save the kids. Well, you don't lower speed limits by lowering a number on a sign. The traffic will continue to go at that prudent free flow speed, regardless of what you lower the speed limit to. And the city's own engineering reports recognize that. They've done 3 since that time in 1988, and they all show that the speed average going through there continues to be 65.
Okay,
It'll never lower.
Yeah, and we'll have to, and thank you for sharing a little bit of insight into that. I just wanted to sort of recap, because we talked about this last week, and I just wanted to quickly reiterate what was going on there. But we did talk about something else last week, and that was one of the main reasons why we wanted to bring you on today. So what we're going to do now, I think, Todd, is actually just pause this conversation for a moment. Todd Dube is with WiseUpWinnipeg, and this has to do with a class action lawsuit in Quebec, which seeks to overturn $50 million worth of photo radar tickets. So we'll get Todd's feedback on this in a moment. Your forecast.
Hey, Brett McGarry, Greg Mackling with you on this Friday afternoon. We're talking about photo radar, and we're discussing with Todd Dube, Wise Up Winnipeg. This is a lawsuit, right, Brett? This is a potential to overturn tens of millions of dollars of photo radar tickets, and this has actually happened in Quebec. A Quebec judge rejects photo radar case over a lack of evidence, and another class action lawsuit seeking to overturn $50 million in photo radar tickets. Todd Dube of Wise Up Winnipeg, are you looking to do the same thing in Manitoba that's happened in Quebec?
I've already given our lawyer that instruction, so we are studying that and following that case, and we expect to make a move on that in the coming months. If I could just comment back to my reference to, I want to just clarify my reference to Thanksgiving. Of course, but the point being that the photo enforcement program is out on all stat holidays, whether school's out for Christmas break or whether it's Remembrance Day, Christmas Day for that matter, and in this case, Thanksgiving Day, where we had a lot of complaints on Thanksgiving Day of getting tickets. So that was my reference to that.
Oh, I think anybody listening would have understood that you were suggesting that the September to June date on the school zones is inclusive of any day of the week.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, Todd, maybe just take us back here. This class action lawsuit is sort of, the door was opened last week when a judge threw out, or when the Crown decided they would not appeal the decision that a judge threw something out. Do you recall what that was?
Certainly. The judge in that case ruled that photo radar evidence amounted to hearsay, as there was no one to witness the driver breaking the law or ensure the machine was functioning properly. That's a quote, actually, from the decision.
And this was a woman had a ticket that was $1,100, and the judge threw it out, and then the Crown decided not to appeal it. So we were talking about whether or not this would set a precedent, and I guess what? It has set a precedent, because now we have a class action lawsuit for $50 million. Over 400,000 tickets have been given since December 30, 2013. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, just to bring it to local context, the City Winnipeg programs issued over 1 million tickets, so it's double the size of that. And let's not forget that Winnipeg's photo tickets are 250% higher than the average of all other provinces. So you could take this into the hundreds of millions of dollars. That's how significant this would be in Manitoba. But, you know, I guess to make sense of this, maybe let's start there. When a police officer issues a ticket, they're required to testify in court that they witnessed the vehicle speeding, and that their laser device then confirmed that personal observation, which is the requirement of the law, the corroboration of those two things. The police also testify in court to their training on the laser device, their calibration testing of that equipment before using it that day. They also testify that they traversed the area prior to ensure that all required signage was erect before enforcing. This is all required personal testimony in order for the Crown to prove the charge of speeding against the driver of that vehicle. Now, that's key there. That's a key aspect, and maybe we should address that first, the driver of that vehicle. Of course, with photo enforcement, they can't meet their requirement of charging the driver, so the province of Manitoba had to create a legal way to charge the owner instead. Mm-hmm. So they created a law permitting Winnipeg to issue tickets to owners of vehicles by treating photo, speed, and red light violations the same as parking tickets, which are summary violations that they can issue to registered owners in the mail, and not even registered mail, to ensure receipt. So if you don't get that mail, you're convicted, and with little to no recourse but to pay it. So the mere fact that the province made it legally possible to issue speed and red light violations to somebody other than the driver should not have happened in the first place. And in many, in many USA jurisdictions, photo programs didn't get that legislative cooperation, and they're required to take two photos, one of the license plate and the other of the driver's face from the side. And then they have to have a legal process server go to that registered address, positively identify that person as the driver, and only then serve that person with the photo violation. So, Todd,
is there any evidence at all that photo enforcement is making intersections, school zones, or our roads overall any safer?
It's quite the contrary. In fact, it's been evidenced that collisions have risen, and these have been media stories. Here's the aggravating part. It's written in the Conditions of Authority. That's a provincial document signed back in year 2000 that requires the city photo enforcement program annually, April 1st, to submit a report establishing that they have achieved gains in safety, a reduction in collisions, for example, and only then can the program continue. Well, they've never once even made or attempted to make that to supply that evidence in that report, because they can't. And this program would have ended after the first year had the province of Manitoba held them to the conditions of their operating agreement.
Todd, one more thing, because we're running up against the clock here. We had a caller yesterday suggest anecdotally that she has noticed a lack of the countdown traffic signals for pedestrians at intersections where there's photo enforcement. They seem to be making an appearance not only downtown but all over the city. Is this anything that you've investigated as a group? Is there a correlation between the lack of this countdown technology for pedestrians at intersections with photo enforcement?
We've seen that. We started noticing that last year. We note that it's become kind of a joke that the last 51 to go in will be the photo camera intersections.
That is absolute fact, Todd?
That's a fact, yeah. You won't find them there. Now, you can call that conspiracy or whatever, but there's so many different instances like that. We've made these cases, and we can make these cases, and we've done it in a PowerPoint that nobody wants to recognize the fact. But that's just one other thing. But here's the bigger thing. Do we have a minute, or do you want to break here?
We have 2 minutes, and then we need to move on. So this is your final, I suppose, your closing argument, Todd.
Well, let's use that as an example then. Because what you're suggesting then is the amber light timing. People stopping at an intersection and drivers approaching. If they see a countdown, they know that they still have a green light. Well, the fact is that drivers shouldn't need to be looking to the right for a countdown. What they need in Winnipeg is proper amber light timing. We have the shortest amber light times in Canada, when in fact we should have the longest, by virtue of Section 88.5 of the Highway Traffic Act, which requires that we have to have enough time in Manitoba to clear the intersection before red, not just enter it. So not only do we not have that, we don't even have enough time to stop before red. We have a 4-second static amber policy in Winnipeg, whereas when you're in 70 and 80 kilometer-hour higher speed intersections, you need longer time to stop than that. Some cities are 6 seconds. So it's by no coincidence that these intersections, specifically the higher speed ones, not only produce 800% more red light runners, so-called, but that's also where you have a great high incidence of collisions. And those intersections are on the top 10 list every year. We can name them.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Todd, thank you so much, buddy. We appreciate the time and the insight, but the clock has gotten us. Todd Dube is with Wise Up Winnipeg, and again, this is the main sort of part of the conversation here is there's a class action lawsuit in Quebec now, which seeks to overturn some $50 million in photo radar tickets, and the door for this was opened by a ruling in November that overturned an $1,100 photo radar ticket, where the judge in that case ruled that photo radar evidence is amounted to hearsay, and the Crown decided just last week, we're not going to appeal this.
Well, because by the very definition, as Todd outlined, if you're going to be held accountable, you need a witness. And we heard just from the city the other day that if you want to report one of your fellow drivers in Winnipeg, go online, you can do that. This is a new thing, but you have to be prepared to appear as a Crown witness in this situation that you're reporting. So Todd Dube and his group are saying, as did happen in Quebec, if you want to convict me of this, you need a witness.